Have you ever wondered what it feels like to lose everything? Not just your money, not just your home, but your identity. To wake up in the back seat of a freezing car, night after night, your breath fogging up the windows, while the world passes by. Unaware that you're dying in slow motion? This isn't fiction. This is real. And this is the story of a man who was forgotten by the world, but refused to forget who he could become. His name is Marcus. Not a celebrity, not a guru. Just a man. A man who hit rock bottom with such force it should have shattered him. But instead, it woke him up. Just 2 years ago, Marcus had a job in finance, a career, a condo, a 5-year plan. He wore suits, shook hands, and recited numbers like prayers. But inside, he was hollow. Every day felt like a silent scream, a life built for someone else, until the day it all came crashing down. It started with the layoff. The company was downsizing. He thought he was safe. He wasn't. One signature ended it all. The next month, his girlfriend left, said he was drifting. And maybe she was right. He was drifting, straight into the void. The bills didn't stop. The rent didn't wait. And the silence in his apartment grew louder. He tried everything: temp jobs, side gigs, selling his old stuff online. But the fall was faster than he could catch it. Until one night, he had no place to go, no keys, no home. Just a 2002 Honda Civic and a backpack full of regret. That first night in the car, he didn't cry. He laughed, not out of joy, out of disbelief. How the hell did it get this bad? He lay flat across the back seat, knees tucked, jacket as a blanket, phone on 3% battery, and no one to call, no one who would pick up. But the real story isn't about the fall, it's about what he did next. The second week on the street, he stopped pretending it was temporary. He started waking up early, not because he wanted to, but because the sunlight forced him to. Every morning, he walked to the same gas station bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and stared into the mirror. There was a moment, around week 3, when he almost gave in. A razor in one hand, a note in the other, but something stopped him. Not hope, not faith, just a question. Is this it? Is this really how my story ends? He put the razor down. That night, he wrote something different, a single sentence, scratched into an old notebook he found in the trunk. I will become someone I admire. It didn't fix anything, but it was the first time he chose to build instead of break. He made a rule for himself. One small act of discipline every day. Day 1, push-ups in the parking lot at 6 a.m. Day 2, no fast food, even if it was cheap. 3, jog 1 mile, even if his lungs burned. Each day, a little more. Each day, a little stronger. He started reading again, borrowed books from the public library. Marcus dove into stories of people who had climbed out of their own ashes. Mandela, Goggins, Viktor Frankl, people who had suffered, broken, rebuilt. It didn't make his car warmer. It didn't make his stomach less empty, but it made his mind unstoppable. There were nights his body ached from cold and training, mornings when he could barely move from the soreness. But he kept going, because pain, at least, made him feel alive. Somewhere, in that 8th week, he began to feel different. Not better, not fixed, but solid, grounded, like he was forging himself in fire. At night, he'd visualize a gym, his gym. He'd imagine the walls, the sweat, the echoes of people pushing themselves. He'd see the logo, hear the music, smell the rubber floors. It wasn't a dream. It was a plan. By month 4, he found a job cleaning equipment at a local fitness center, part-time, minimum wage. But he was the first to arrive and the last to leave. Every time he scrubbed a weight rack or mopped sweat off the mats, he imagined it was his place, and he trained there too, after hours. Alone. No phone, no selfies, no applause, just a man in silence, becoming something else. Stories like this deserve to be told, and that's exactly what we do here. because somewhere out there, someone needs to be reminded of what they're capable of. By month 6, he had saved just enough for a cheap room, a real mattress, a door that locked, hot water. It felt like a palace. He cried that first night, staring at the ceiling, whispering, "I'm not going back." But he wasn't done. Now came the real work. Every morning, Marcus woke up before the sun. Not because he had to, but because that's what warriors do. While the world was still asleep, he was already sweating, pushing, breaking the limits of yesterday. His routine became sacred. Cold shower, 5 a.m. run, reading, training, writing down goals, every single day, without fail. The man who once lived in a car was now building a fortress inside himself. He stopped chasing motivation. He became his own source of energy, even on the days he didn't feel it, especially on those days. And that's when the shift happened. One night, while taking out the gym trash, he heard 2 trainers talking. One said, "This place is losing members fast." Marcus froze, not out of fear, but opportunity. Later that night, he wrote a letter to the owner, handwritten, raw, full of fire. He didn't beg. He didn't pitch. He said, "If you're willing to let me try, I'll bring people in. I'll train them. I'll give them everything I've got. Just give me one shot." 3 days later, the owner called him in. "All right," the man said, arms crossed. "Let's see what you've got." Marcus wasn't certified. He had no credentials, but he had scars. He had pain, and he knew how to turn it into power. His first client was a middle-aged man with back problems. The second, a woman recovering from heartbreak and depression. He didn't just train their bodies, he trained their minds. He taught them what he taught himself in that car. Discipline is love. Pain is fuel. And no one is too broken to rebuild. 1 became 3. 3 became 10. Within 2 months, people started coming to the gym just to train with him. His sessions were brutal, honest, and transformative. He didn't sell hype. He sold reality. People came because they were tired of lies, tired of pretending. They wanted someone who had bled, someone who had failed, and rose anyway. He became that man. By the end of that year, Marcus had saved every extra dollar he earned. No parties, no clothes, no distractions, just work, food, books, and sleep. And then he took the leap. He found a small, worn-down space in the industrial part of the city. A leaky roof, moldy walls, broken floor tiles. But the rent was cheap, and the landlord didn't ask too many questions. Marcus signed the lease with trembling hands. He had $3,000 left in his account. Not enough for equipment, not enough for ads, just enough to begin. He called it the Forge because he believed in one thing. You don't find strength, you build it, you hammer it, you suffer for it. The first thing he installed wasn't a bench or a squat rack. It was a mirror, the same kind he stared into every day in that gas station bathroom. It was a reminder. This is where you fight for your life. He spray-painted words on the wall above the entrance. Earn your oxygen. No free passes, no easy days. You show up or you don't. But if you do, you leave different. At first it was just 5 members, then 20. He trained them personally. No fancy tech, no gimmicks, just sweat, pain, and truth. They told their friends. Those friends told others. Soon, the Forge became something more than a gym. It became a sanctuary for the broken, war room for the forgotten, a proving ground for anyone who still believed they had more inside them. People came from other cities. Some flew in from other states. They weren't looking for abs. They were looking for redemption. And Marcus gave it to them, the only way he knew how. Through fire. One morning, as Marcus unlocked the door to the Forge, he paused. The sun hadn't risen yet. The air was still and heavy, but something felt different. The kind of silence that happens before transformation. He stepped inside, turned on the lights and looked around. Rubber mats worn from hundreds of training, Hours, ropes hanging like battle scars, chalk in the air, music in the walls. This place, this temple of struggle, had saved him. He touched the mirror, that same mirror from the gas station days, and it hit him. He wasn't the same man anymore. But he remembered. He remembered every freezing night in that Civic, every rejection, every ache in his bones from training without rest. Every time he had to fight the voice that said, "You're not enough." He still heard that voice sometimes, but now, he talked back. That day, he decided it was time to go all in. He borrowed $10,000 from a former client who had become a close friend and believer. It wasn't charity, it was belief. Marcus promised to pay back every cent with interest, and he did. In 6 months, he upgraded the gym, equipment, lighting, branding. But more than that, he built a team. Trainers like him, forged by struggle, not privilege. People who knew pain and knew how to guide others through it. He trained his staff not in marketing or sales, but in philosophy. "We're not here to change bodies," he told them. "We're here to change minds. Bodies are just the result." Clients began to call the Forge a cult, not in the toxic sense, but in the way it made them feel like they belonged, like they were part of a mission, like they were reclaiming something the world had taken from them. Dignity. Word spread fast. Social media picked up on it. But Marcus never posted flashy videos or before and afters. Instead, he filmed raw training sessions. People screaming through, pain, crying mid-workout, hugging after breakthroughs. He didn't build a gym. He built a movement, and then came the first million, not overnight, not from one viral post. It was a slow, relentless climb, month by month, referral by referral, client by client, until the day he opened his second location, then a third. He had offers to sell. Investment firms reached out. "We can scale this to 50 gyms nationwide," they said. But Marcus said no, because this wasn't about scale. It was about soul. One night, after locking up the flagship gym, he walked out and saw a young man sitting on the curb, thin, pale, eyes hollow, a small backpack next to him, and a blanket draped over his legs. Marcus didn't ask questions. He recognized the look. He was that look. He sat down beside the kid. They didn't speak for a long time, just sat in silence. Then Marcus asked, "You hungry?" The kid nodded. They shared a meal. Nothing fancy, just eggs and rice from the 24-hour diner down the street. But for Marcus, it was communion. As they ate, he said something he hadn't said in years. "You don't have to stay there. I know it feels like you're invisible, but I see you." That was the moment Marcus realized. Success means nothing if you forget where you came from. So he launched a free mentorship program inside the Forge for homeless youth and recovering addicts. Every Saturday at 6 a.m., he trains them, not for money, not for fame, but because someone once believed in him, before he believed in himself, and that changed everything. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, without fireworks, but they change everything. For Marcus, that moment came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, when he passed by the old parking lot where it all began. The Civic was long gone. The gas station had been remodeled. But the space, the ghost of that space, was still there. He stood in the same spot he once slept in, same corner where he used to do push-ups at 2 a.m. to stay warm, same place he nearly gave up on everything. He knelt to the ground and closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he cried, not out of pain, out of recognition. That version of him, the broken one, wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was the foundation. It was the man who stayed alive when no one else could see a future. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a letter, written not to someone else, but to himself. To the man he was 10 years ago. To the man sleeping in the Civic. "I know you're tired. I know you're angry. I know you think this is the end. But it's not. It's the fire. And you're the forge. I know you're scared to hope, but I promise, every rep, every tear, every cold night, it's not wasted. You're going to build something that saves people. You're going to become the man you needed back then. But only if you keep going. So tonight, when you cry in silence, when you think no one cares, just remember I'm waiting for you. I'm proof that you make it out. Don't quit. The world needs you, even if it doesn't know it yet. He folded the letter back up and left it beneath a loose tile near the sidewalk, not for someone to find, not as a gesture, but as a burial, a laying to rest of everything he used to be, and a salute to the man who refused to die. On the way back to the gym, Marcus passed a bookstore and stopped. Something pulled him in. He remembered how, during his hardest days, he would read a few pages of borrowed books inside stores just to keep his mind alive. Psychology, stoicism, training manuals, biographies of great warriors. Now, he walked to the counter and bought 10 copies of one title, Man's Search for Meaning. Back at the forge, he placed them on a shelf near the front door. A new sign above them read, "Take one if you're lost." One evening, a film crew came by. They wanted to shoot a documentary about him. He agreed, but with one condition. "Don't make me a hero. Make me a mirror," he sat on camera. No makeup, no edits, no script. Just truth. And he told his story. Every ugly, raw, humiliating part, sleeping in a Civic, eating scraps, being ignored, wanting to die. Then, the discipline, the rise, the rebuild, the calling. At the end of the shoot, they asked one last question. What do you say to the man who thinks he's broken beyond repair? Marcus looked straight at the lens, eyes sharp, voice steady, and said, "You're not broken, you're buried, and it's time to rise." The forge wasn't just a gym anymore, it had become something deeper, a kind of sanctuary for the broken. The hungry, the silent warriors who no longer wanted to be victims of their story. Marcus began hosting something called the 4 a.m. sessions. No announcements, no marketing, no fancy sign-up forms, just a quiet message on the door. If you're ready to rebuild from the ruins, come at 4 a.m. Come alone. And they came. First it was just one man, then 3, then 9. Men who had lost marriages, lost jobs, lost themselves. They didn't come for fitness. They came for rebirth. Marcus never greeted them with motivational speeches. He handed them bricks. Literally, he made them carry bricks from one end of the gym to the other, over and over, for 30 minutes. No music, no talking, just struggle. Why? Because he knew what it meant to rebuild something with your hands, because he understood, before you can lift yourself, you must first carry your burden, not run from it. He told them, "You're not weak because you fell. You're strong because you showed up." Some left, but most stayed, because suffering, when shared with intention, becomes sacred. One morning after a session, a young man approached Marcus, tears in his eyes, calloused hands, shaking slightly. He said, "My dad left when I was 10. I've hated him ever since. But carrying those bricks, I think I finally dropped some of that hate." Marcus nodded, but didn't respond right away. Then he said something he hadn't said even to himself. "My father never told me he was proud of me, not once. But I stopped needing it the day I became the man I needed him to be." They stood there for a while in silence, because some truths don't need more words. Months passed. The forge grew, not in size, in depth. It became known for its initiation nights, intense 12-hour events where men would push through limits they didn't know they had. Ice baths, mental challenges, darkness training. But the most powerful part wasn't physical. It was the circle at the end. All phones off. Lights dimmed, everyone barefoot. Each man would share the one moment in life that nearly broke him. Some spoke of addiction, others of betrayal. some of shame so deep they couldn't look in a mirror. But in that room there was no judgment, only witnessing, only the sacred act of being seen, and it changed them. Because the truth is, most people aren't dying from failure, they're dying from being unseen. And Marcus, he had once lived in that invisibility, but now he had built a place where no one would be forgotten. One night, after everyone had gone home, Marcus walked alone through the gym. He touched every weight, every wall, every echo. He sat in the center of the room, closed his eyes, and asked himself one final question. Was it worth it? The pain, the isolation, the cold nights in that Civic, the years of being overlooked, the silence, the sacrifice, the self-reconstruction. He didn't answer with words. He opened his eyes and smiled, because he knew he had become the man he once prayed for, not through miracles, not through luck, but through fire. It was a rainy Thursday when Marcus received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter mailed to the forge. It was from his mother. They hadn't spoken in over 7 years. The last time they did, he was still living in the Civic, and she had said words that carved scars so deep they echoed in every pull-up, every set, every brick he carried. But this letter was different. I don't know if you'll read this, but I saw a video of you. Someone sent it to me. I didn't recognize you at first. Then I did. You looked like your father, but you moved like someone reborn. I'm sorry for not believing in you. I'm sorry for making your pain worse, but I'm proud of you now. Not because you built something, but because you didn't let the darkness take you. Come visit me sometime if you want. Love, Mom. He held the letter in his calloused hands for a long time. He didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because something had changed. The boy who once begged for her approval had died. The man standing there now didn't need permission to be whole, but forgiveness. That was different. So he drove, not to prove anything, not to confront, but to close the loop. When she opened the door, they stood in silence. Two people who had both bled in silence for too long. And then she stepped forward and hugged him, not like a mother to a son, but like one survivor recognizing another. Weeks later, back at the forge, Marcus stood before a group of men finishing their 4 a.m. session. He looked at them, sweat-covered, tired, some shaking, others with tears streaming down their faces, and said something simple. You're not here to get stronger. You're here to remember that you always were. One of the younger guys asked, how do you know when you've made it? Marcus smiled. When the thing that broke you becomes the reason someone else survives. That night alone, he turned off the lights and walked to the mirror. The same one he used when he couldn't look at himself. He stared for a long time, then whispered, "Thank you for not dying," and turned away. Not because he didn't care anymore, but because he had finally become more than his past. Every brick he carried, every scar he wore, every night he cried in silence. It all led here, not to fame, not to success, but to purpose. Because he was no longer just Marcus, the broken man in the Civic. He was Marcus, the Forge, and now he wasn't alone. And if you're still here, maybe part of you needed to hear this. Maybe there's something inside you that knows you were made for more. So take this story, not as a fairy tale, but as evidence. That pain can shape purpose. That broken doesn't mean finished, and that your fire, no matter how dim, can still burn through everything trying to silence it. This is what we do here. We tell the stories that remind you who you are, even when the world forgets. If you felt this, if it moved something in you, subscribe. Not just to the channel, but to the part of yourself that refuses to give up. There's more coming. Stories that hurt, that heal, stories that forge. Because somewhere out there, another Marcus is waiting to rise, and we're not going to let him do it alone.